afternoon, everyone. It's my privilege to welcome and introduce Mr. Subroto Bagchi to all of you. Although considering his fan following in Ujjivan.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure. Actually, I was telling Ms. Manikya that I don't go around giving talks and things like that because I have a company to run, and when I'm not doing that, I focus my attention to writing because I think that by that we reach many people. And I always think of Ujjivan very differently compared to many organizations, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I don't really want to give you a big talk here. I will just set the context, and it would be very nice if you can give me your thoughts, your ideas, push back, put me down. Let's have a dialogue and a conversation. So to set the context or set the stage, so to speak, let me ask you a basic question. How many of you are worried about the pace at which Ujjivan is growing? Do you think it's growing slowly? Do you think it's growing okay? Or do you at times feel that, my God, I think we're growing too fast? Do you at times feel that you are growing too fast? Maybe you should slow down a little bit. Does the pace scare you sometimes? And I'm not surprised to hear this because, I have watched Ujjivan closely, and I have read about your achievements. And I think you essentially symbolize many of the things that I have been going around the country talking to entrepreneurs about, and that is the whole theory of scaling. Actually, you'll be surprised, for most people, scale is a very scary thing. People feel uncomfortable about pace, and people are not as much as at ease as Lalita seems to be, or most of you are in this room seem to be. Now, fundamentally, if you look at the idea of scale, it is different from the idea of growth. Growth is typically unidimensional. You're growing just the top line, okay, or you're growing just the bottom line, or you're growing the number of advances you're making. So that's growth. But when we think of scale, it is not a single dimensional or unidimensional thing. Scale is something which is, a variety of things. So that's why we say that if you grow without scaling, then it is like having cancer, okay? Because cancer is also a growth, right? Cancer is a cell that has forgotten to die, and it keeps on growing and keeps on growing. And many organizations that grow without scaling actually collapse under their own weight. And there are so many examples in your own industry. It's amazing that even today, when you write your annual report, you fall back on the SKS story. So SKS is a classic example of growth and not scale. So what is scale? Organizations that scale usually pay attention to multiple different things. And I see Ujjivan has done that. So why am I telling you this? I'm telling you this so that you get the reinforcement or the assurance that you're on the right track. Okay. So sometimes it's a good idea to have some outside guy come in and say, no, you not only are rock stars, you think that you're rock stars, but you are really, really rock stars. So now, when I looked at organizations in the country, typically in India, that are scaling, I found that there are several things common to these, and I can put a tick mark on all of those on Ujjivan. First and foremost, organizations that scale, or for that matter, individuals that scale, because organizations are nothing but individuals, right? If you take people in this room away and people who are on the video conference, Ujjivan is gone. There's nothing to Ujjivan than the 3,000 plus people that you have. So I keep saying that organizations don't go anywhere. People go someplace. And when people go someplace, they take the organization with them. That's how it works. So if you look at organizations and individuals who scale, first and foremost, the people who are comfortable with the idea of scale. And you as a group are comfortable with the idea of scale. In any other company or organization, there would have been at least 6 hands. People would have raised and said, maybe we should slow down. Maybe, as we are looking at already 1 million customers, our physical infrastructure is not coping, or our digital infrastructure is not coping, or we are not as good as we were when we were in the other Koramangala place. Because a lot of people miss childhood, and childhood is very nice, but we are not meant to keep our baby fat. Baby fat is very cute, but you're meant to shed your baby fat. But a lot of us feel that childhood was very nice. So the Koramangala office was very nice. When the first 20 people were there, we all knew each other. Now we don't know who's coming, who's going, and those kinds of things. So people inherently don't feel comfortable. The second thing that I find is common to organizations that scale is that they seem to be changing something very perceptibly. That is something that we can see from outside, once in roughly every 5 years. Okay, and these have to do with usually 3 things. Who's your customer? What is the product or service that you are serving the customer with? And third thing is the method in which that is getting delivered. If these 3 things are not changing once in every 5 years, as seen not by you but from outside, then that means you're not scaling. It's very interesting because most of us are told that you must be in love with your customer. Okay. There's a problem of being too much in love with your customer. If you're too much in love with your customer, you will not look at others who may be your customers or to whom you may be better suited to serve. So sometimes what happens is, in trying to build customer intimacy, we do that at the cost of other customers. And it is a little like, hugging your customer at the deep end of the swimming pool. Okay. In the deep end of the swimming pool, you are meant to swim. Okay. You're not meant to hold somebody in what we call a deadly embrace. Okay. So many times you're just hugging each other so tight that both of us are going down. In that context, it's very important for us to know that we not only must serve customers, but we must get new customers, newer customers, and newer kinds of customers. And our products and services must change every 5 years. So if you're serving the same set of customers, same kinds of customers with same products or services, then that means there's something fundamentally wrong. The third thing is organizations that scale actually begin by scaling intellect. Okay. What does it mean? Organization building is a mind game. Okay. It happens in the mind, and whatever happens in the mind, we actually transfer that to the outside world, and lo and behold, something comes up. So Ujjivan in the beginning didn't exist. It happened in somebody's mind and some people's mind. And then slowly things fell into place. Today you have 3,000 people. Tomorrow you may be 30,000 people. Today you may be serving 10 states. Tomorrow you may actually go global. Okay. So it begins as a mind game. And many times what happens is we can't break through. We hit a glass ceiling. And then we say, you know what, the market is not good. Okay. You know what, there are external factors, the government is not doing its job, RBI is not doing its job, the market is not good, the competition is ugly, whatever. Okay, so we blame external factors. But the fact of the matter is, inside our mind, we are not scaling. So we are hitting a glass ceiling. So it's a mind game. If you can imagine things inside our mind, then we can imagine it outside. Okay. So how do you scale intellect? There are many ways in which people scale intellect, and I would like to hear from you how you are scaling intellect at Ujjivan, and I'll give you some thoughts about how other people are doing it. So failure to scale is failure to scale your own mind. The fourth thing is organizations that scale first have to invest in reputation as a capital. So they scale reputation. I think what Ujjivan has done is Ujjivan has scaled reputation. His reputation is a new capital. We began, hundreds of years back thinking that money is capital. Then we said machinery is capital. Then we said human resource is capital. But today, reputation is the new capital. It's very interesting. A reputation is new capital means what? It means that you can actually make settlements using reputation. We all know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we know who's good at what. Right? Now, you don't realize that 10 years just goes in the blink of an eye. And people talk about Infosys and TCS and all the IT companies. Actually, ITC is one of India's top 5 most valued companies. Professionally run company, doesn't belong to anybody, and look at the way that they have been able to grow and they have been able to scale. So you'll say, why are you talking about big companies here? We are microfinance people, we are poor people serving the poor. So I'll tell you a poor story. It's amazing that you point that out. And right in the beginning, I was telling you that people who scale, what's the first rule? Where to stay, where is the PG, what food you will eat, who you'll be friends with. All those things fell into place. You didn't have those answers when you left your hometown. So you're comfortable with the idea of skill. So that's number one. Number two, every 5 years, whether I'm a human being as an individual professional or I'm a company, something must change visibly. If you're serving the same customer, the same product or service delivered in the same way, then you probably are in a deadly embrace. Okay. At the deep end of the pool, you are meant to swim, you are not meant to hug somebody. So that's rule number 2. Rule number 3 is people who scale, they scale intellect first. It's a mind game, right? Rule number 4 is we have to scale reputation before we scale anything. And today, more than ever before, reputation is the new capital. And the interesting thing about reputation as a capital is that unlike other forms of capital, if you lose it once, it's very difficult to get it back. If you lose money, you can get money. If you lose machinery, insurance company will pay for it. If your people tomorrow run away to join Citibank, it'll pinch in a period of time. Some of them will understand the mistake, come back to Ujjivan, okay, and you can raise some more people. So you will get your human capital back. But your reputation capital, once it goes out, once your SKS, the leopard, whatever spots it changes, it's not going to do the same again. Okay. Then, of course, we have to scale people. And last but not the least, we have to scale adversity. Some of the challenges, organizational, personal, have nothing to do with the profession, nothing to do with the product or service that you and I are going to deliver. You just look at Dr. V's own life, okay? Now your fingers become crooked, what can you do? Now what he has proven is that he could scale adversity. So much of our professional setbacks are actually handleable if we deal with them at a personal level. And at the personal level, we collapse for something, the profession will go for a 6. So many of the problems that many high achievers encounter are actually they're rooted in their personal ability. Since you are bankers, you talk about risk all the time. the risk-taking capability, the risk orientation is a very personal thing. It's sometimes we even say that it is genetic. Okay. So at a certain level, our capacity to go from place A to place B has nothing to do with our professional competence. It's got to do with our capacity to be resilient, capacity to deal with the ups and downs of life. So with that, let me thank you, and let me hand it over to all of you, particularly to the friends on video conference. Why don't you lead with some questions?
Today, in the world, in India, this whole internet marketing and retailing and servicing is controlled by the Bansals. They are not related, but I mean, maybe distantly related, but maybe there's something genetically, Bansals were traders basically, and now they control the entire retail trade on the net in India. It's quite amazing.
It's a risky thing to talk about genetics because it always attracts extreme reactions, and the same scientists tell us that, look, the human brain is extremely plastic. What they mean by plastic is moldable. So genetics is also not fully understood, and people are saying different things as they're discovering. They're saying that we also have, as a human race, the capacity to beat our genetics. You have DNA and they have RNA. Okay. And so, and then you have the capacity of the brain to also overrule certain things which are in your DNA or in RNA. So the brain learns as it evolves. Now, so when we say that, look, there is something genetic in here, it sometimes attracts sharp criticism from people saying, oh, you can push that theory sometimes to say, that means some people are gifted, that means other people can't get into retail, as long as the Bansals are there. But for now, yeah, there seems to be some need for some deeper study here. Questions, thoughts, observations? Sir, he raised his hand first, then please.
I just narrate a situation and I would want to hear your views on that, which is...
Hello sir, this is Swapnil from West. Sir, I had a question.
Actually, he has started it. Let's hear him, and then we'll come to you, Swapnil. Okay? Just hang in there, Swapnil.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to show your face to them?
My question is, as you scale, typically, I'm also relating to this Arvind Eye Hospital experience because I was a small kid and I took my grandmother for this eye operation in Arvind Eye Hospital. And what was very amazing was, in that kind of a scale, when they are handling almost like assembly line, what was there was my granny was feeling a huge love and affection in the way they were treating her. So it's more than that hospital operation or the scare at that age, and they were showing her videos, and then all these nurses who were there employed were really caring and showing that affection. It gave her a comfort because it was the first operation she was going through. So my question is that as you scale and operate at a very large level, it can be possible that you can get mechanized, and you say that tuck, I need to kind of close with the timeline. And how do you still keep that care and connection which is possible in a kind of a smaller setup?
It's a big challenge, and it is not an easy thing at all. And only very few organizations and companies can do it. To begin with, I think it's got to do with the organization's core people, and their own personal beliefs and what price they're willing to pay for that personal belief. Because what you're talking about here is empathy. And I all the time tell my HR people particularly that, look, HR people would love to reduce everything to process. Okay. From entry to exit, everything cut, process. Okay. Form filling, workflow process. So look, you've got to have your P ratio right. Okay. So process to empathy. And if you think something is process bound, then you have to say, so where is the empathy in it? And if something is purely being driven by empathy, then that's not scalable. So then you say, so where is the process in it? And when there's a contention, okay, the bias has to be in favor of empathy, not in favor of process. Now, Arvind Eye Hospital could do it because Dr. V, to him it was service. To him he was not wanting to be the fastest growing hospital. He was not here to get Great Place to Work award. He was not here to have market cap or do a public issue or something like that. To him it was service. And that came from his early life experience with Sri Aurobindo's philosophy. And that permeated. And it is like his core thinking touched the family's core thinking touched the extended family, those who came in. And, an idea became viral. Okay. Arvind is a great example of virality. For many organizations like yours, okay, it will be a challenge at some stage, and each organization will go through its downs before they will find their ups. Okay. Some beliefs, some values will have to be tested. It is not something that's a downloadable thing from the intranet that you'll see Samit's picture and his speech and say we must keep our empathy alive. I think a lot depends on storytelling. Okay, a lot depends on how much you love your customer and respect your customers. And in your business, actually, empathy is easier to keep because you see a direct connection between your lending and how the flower seller's life has changed. Okay, so every lending process, unlike a Citibank and a State Bank of India and whatever other bank that has a license to kill, okay, unlike them, you can see a direct relationship between your act and the impact. Okay. So you are much luckier. Whereas it's much more difficult for, let's say, a software engineering company, where most software engineers don't know how their code is impacting the last mile. So you have to keep the story, you have to believe in something, and you have to be prepared that some of it will not work at some point in time. Process will try to kill empathy. Okay. At that point in time, you have to pay some price, and hopefully you will, like your colleague was saying, I forgot his name. Rajat, who introduced me, Rajat. Okay. Who talked about our own challenge of in the first 15 years, we're just a 15-year-old company, we were culture-led. Okay, now, which means that customers thought we were very good guys. But people don't give you heavy lifting business because you're good guys. Okay. At the point of contact, they want to know that you will be capable of doing the heavy lifting work. Okay. So while we're the good guys, the bad guys were getting their bigger business. So in our next course of the next 5-10 years, we are consciously saying that we must be expertise-led and culture-backed. Okay. So if you go to your friendly GP, you're not necessarily looking for expertise. You are looking for, will the guy has time for me, will offer me a cup of tea, is he nice, does he smile at my baby, all that kind of stuff. But if you have to get a brain surgery done, you don't expect niceties from the brain surgeon. At the point of contact, you want to feel that, oh, the guy knows what he's going to do. Okay. So that's the transition that we are making. And a lot of conversation is happening inside the company that by being expertise led, will we lose some of our intimacy? Will we lose our closeness? So each organization will have to walk the path, and it's easy to fall off on either side. So it's a challenge we're going through. At some stage, you will go through that challenge, but it's very important to keep the faith and know that the biggest thing working in your favor, which is not working in case of many other companies, is this direct connection between act and impact. As long as the flower seller is the most important person in your business, your empathy will be fine. But they will actually carry you on their shoulder, not the other way around. That's the power of your business. And also that is how unimportant you are. You know, we think we are empowering, no, they are empowering us. Without them, Ujjivan won't exist. So the reason for existence is the other way around. And, there is, like Muhammad Yunus would tell, or Gandhi would tell, Dr. V would tell you, the poor are actually very rich people. Their capacity to give is far higher, and their intensity and emotion and feelings is very different. So if you're coming in close contact with the poor, okay, it is difficult. You really have to be very, very bad to lose empathy, the soul of the organization. Now, he explains this in a very interesting way. He says that any growth is destructible, is inherently destructible, okay? Because any form of growth is a tension. Now, the tension is between some forces that want to go far and some forces who don't want to go. Okay, so they are called centripetal and centrifugal forces, right? So if you try to make me grow by pulling me from both my arms, then you'll see the tension until I'll fall apart, right? So I will keep growing without falling apart as long as the tension between the two forces is managed well. So most organizations actually don't fail because of external reasons. They fail because they collapse under their own weight, because the centripetal forces and the centrifugal forces are really working against each other. So the question therefore that comes up, according to Drucker, so how do we then grow without breaking apart? So Drucker says, look at Mother Nature. How has Mother Nature handled the problem? Mother Nature found out very early on in evolution what is the optimum number of times that the heart should beat. Okay. Once she figured that out, she's actually kept it constant in a frog and a human being, okay, and a housefly, right? So the number of times the heart beats is the same, right? So what she did is that she kept that as constant and changed forms around it. Number of times the heart beats remain constant irrespective of whether you're a frog or a horse or a human being. So some things remain constant. Similarly, the thing that is common to all of you and me is that we are symmetric at the poles. So we have what is called polar symmetry, right? At the poles, we are symmetric. If you cut me into two pieces, I am actually quite symmetric. And that's why we are balanced. So there is this concept of heartbeat and polar symmetry. Once she figured these two things out, she kept these two things as constant, and she kept on changing life forms around it. So with polar symmetry and heartbeat, she got the housefly, she got the two-legged man, the four-legged donkey, and n number of creatures she created. So the question Peter Drucker asks is, when we are creating companies, what is the equivalent of polar symmetry and what is the equivalent of a heartbeat of a company? If we can figure that out, then we should keep that as constant and change everything else around it. And the opinion that he has, and I agree with him, is that the heartbeat of the organization is the values of the organization. Once you figured what those values are, okay, like Mother Nature figured out, it was not a given how many times the heart should beat. So she must have gone through many, trials and ups and downs. So once she figured it out, once you figure out your values, you have to hold on to those and keep that as constant. Then what happens is, today you are hiring people in Bangalore, tomorrow you'll hire people in Himachal Pradesh, day after tomorrow you'll hire people in Nepal. It doesn't matter. So it's like two-legged, four-legged, six-legged centipede. Okay. Now, if you lose your values, okay, then the organization will, fall under its own weight.
Talked about the heartbeat, being values. You also talked about that symmetry.
Polar symmetry.
Yeah. How does that relate to?
But actually, he was taking two examples to bring home the point that some things must remain constant, and once that happens, then everything else you can change around it. That's what he meant.
He said, imagine, it's all in mind. Imagine and it's there outside, right? Does it change reality if you imagine something? Reality is reality. How does it change? Can you help me with that?
Now, actually, you should ask that question to a philosopher. But see, it's very interesting. We are sitting in a microfinance organization, so we should actually talk about a microfinance person's way of answering this. And Tara Tyagarajan, who founded, or rather runs Madura, she's a neuroscientist. I don't know how many of you know her background. She was actually a student of mathematics, then took her MBA in Kellogg, and she was very fascinated with neuroscience. So she used to go and hang around the neuroscience lab. And in the West, things are different. So the professor there said, why don't you come inside? And she would tinker around with things. And then a time came when she was allowed to do her own experiments. So her PhD from Stanford is actually on neuroscience. And, I would have loved to show you one of her experiments, which I actually have on my computer. So what she did as one of her experiments is she took the brain, we talk about imagination, right? So imagination happening in the brain. And the brain has synapses, okay, brain cells. So she took some synapses from the brain and took the cells, and the cells in the brain have hands and legs, okay, and they connect to each other. That's how they're continuously communicating. And when the cells are communicating, those are ideas and thoughts, okay. So a typical day, an average individual has 65,000 ideas that cross in the mind, typically, thoughts. So these 65,000 thoughts are nothing but interactions happening between the synapses in the brain. So she took those, cut off the hands and legs of the cells, the ones that connect to each other. Left, so it's basically you reduce the cell to its bare bone, put it in a petri dish, a small experimental dish, and went away. After a week or so, when she came back, they had grown their hands and legs, okay, and they're in contact with each other. Okay. So her theory was that we are designed for contact. We are designed to be with each other. We're designed to communicate. Without that, we cannot stay. So if you cut me my hands and legs and everything, I'll regrow them. And this is a very important element of microfinance, because if you look at the millions of people out there, the flower seller is designed to communicate to the thelawala who's designed to communicate to the fishmonger. They're designed to do business with each other. So the inside reality and the outside reality are mimicking each other. Okay. The reason, in that microfinance world, the slum dweller and the vegetable seller and the flower seller, the reason that they can't stay away from each other is because inside our head, the brain cells cannot stay away from each other. The other very interesting thing that she did is when the brain is not functioning properly, what happens is today if you do an MRI, you'll see parts of a person with depression. The brain actually fails to light up in certain parts of the head. You can see it on an MRI picture. So some parts the electrical activity is not happening, so those are dark spots. And then the individual is going through depression or whatever it is. Now, what she has done is taken satellite pictures of parts of the world, and when you see the world, or for that matter, let's imagine that you are coming down in a plane and landing on Bangalore airport, and you see the whole place lit up, and a particular portion that is not lit up is a portion experiencing power cut. Okay. So it's the same thing. It's like the way that if you have to map the brain, the lit up brain looks like a lit up city. So more light means more energy, more communication, more. She actually relates it to GDP and says 80%. If you take a satellite image of the world, you imagine if you fly over Dubai, it looks like a cluster of lights. 80% of the world's GDP is actually in the lit up portions of the world. So we create a world, we create human organizations and cities which actually look like the human brain. That's what a neuroscientist is saying. And we can alter reality. In fact, we can be blind to reality. You can psych yourself into believing. In India, the Congress lost the election. Okay, they had psyched themselves into refusing to see the reality. So sometimes you refuse to see the reality. And Modi was a nobody. Who knew Modi? Even, I'm sure when the Godhra riots were taking place, Modi didn't see himself as Prime Minister. But he willed and he wanted it. It happened in his head. And he willed his way, literally, into the Prime Ministership of the biggest democracy in the world. So Modi is a guy who altered the reality. He created the reality in his head. The capacity to take risk. It is not the risk, it is about, at some level, you would have heard about C.K. Prahlad, and he would always say that our job is not to take a risk. Okay, that's not how your investors gave you money, that go take risks. Our job is to de-risk risk. Right? Our job is to de-risk risk. So I am here, I want to go here, in between there are crocodiles, right? I have to go here. How do I go here? By de-risking the different kinds of crocodiles in the water. That's my job. So it is not as much as just taking the risk, but anticipating the consequences, knowing when to go how far, is something to do with the self-awareness of an individual. How far should I go? When should I call the other person's bluff? He's a person who is a high achiever saying, if you don't match my salary, another microfinance is giving me more money and giving me a posting closer home and giving more responsibilities. So when will you say, okay, good luck? And you know that the guy will take 4 of your people. So will you, as they say in English, there's something called who will blink first. Okay. Who blinks first is a deeply personal thing. You would have seen in many Hindi films, no? I can't remember which movie it was, but Akshay Devgan, he actually, the villain has got guns in both hands, and this officer doesn't have anything. And he confidently walks towards this guy. And it happens in English movies all the time, where a good police officer says, drop that gun. He says, don't come closer, I'm going to shoot you. He said, drop that gun. He said, don't come any closer, I'm going to shoot you. Drop that gun. Okay? And finally, like a, useless, fellow, he just drops the gun. So, at that moment, the risk that this individual is taking is with his own life. And it happens in the armed forces, it happens. The power is in somebody else's hand. It said, drop that, I'm telling you to drop that. Where does that self-confidence come from? Not from your MBA degree, not from your professional net worth competence. It comes from...
In the old days, driving in the northern roads, with Haryana roadways, buses running, you have to overtake those buses, or, they're coming, Punjab roadways and all that. You just looked at that driver's eyes, and said, are you going to get off or am I?
Right.
Just a last one question from us on the risk point is that when you're scaling up, there are risks. There's this belief of risk. Has been discovered bad at all?
Nobody can, it's too generic a question, actually.
In a scaling?
Yeah, so it's too generic because, the moment you say risk, then there's a phrase called risk appetite. Okay. So what is your risk appetite? And what is your risk charter? What did he say? Did he say, go have party with my money? Go give it without, not even collaterals? Don't even go and counsel that person if he drinks up the money and doesn't show up, okay, the next day to push his card. So, what is this charter? And what is your own organizational mission, vision, and values? So, risk cannot be seen in isolation. Risk is something that must be seen in terms of the promises you have made to him, promises you made to yourself. Because in the beginning, when you decided to save the world as Ujjivan, the flower seller didn't come to your house, no? Right? Nobody came and said, please save us from, if you wouldn't have come, somebody else would have come. Right? So what promise did you make to yourself? And so you look at the whole thing from that point of view, and then it becomes clearer. But always remember what C.K. Prahlad said, our job is not to take risk. Our job is to de-risk risk. There's no glory in, doing acrobatics with investor money. And acrobatics, anything that you do in a heroic way actually will hurt the flower seller. Because, we have no right in taking people from here with a promise to take them here and leave them midair. Okay. If we do something that breaks their confidence, right, then the battle is lost. So when you take that risk, the question to ask is, will it be sustainable from the flower seller's perspective? Is it good for her? Actually, Gandhi said it very nicely. In a moment of conflict, ask, is it good for all the stakeholders? As simple as that. If not, then I'm not saying don't do it. If not, then step back. Take a deep breath. Go talk to Samit. Do a focus group discussion here. Okay. Go back to the people who have given you money and say, maybe the time has come to rethink. But please, in that moment, don't shoot first and then take aim. So what many of us do is first we shoot and then we take aim. Don't do that. Thank you so much. Good luck and goodbye.